for speaking with us on this matter. With the preliminary autopsy showing no obvious signs of homicide, and since the DNA report has come back with most likely match, is this case over?
No, it's not over. It's still an open investigation on our part. At this point, we're waiting for the remains to be returned to the medical examiner and for him to issue his final autopsy report.
At one point in the investigation, y'all were looking at whether or not foul play may have been involved. Is that still the case?
We have not been able to prove one way or the other whether foul play was involved, but we have exhausted a tremendous amount of investigative effort and time. We followed up on a tremendous amount of leads in the area, and our investigation at this point is pretty close to being concluded as far as that goes.
There were, and I'm looking over, investigators executed over 50 digital search warrants, analyzed over 1,500 gigabyte of data. Has that information been processed, and has that pointed to anything?
It has been processed. It did lead us to different individuals that we identified that were in that area at roughly that time of that evening. So what we had early on, we mentioned that we went out shortly after he went missing, and we scoured the area looking for surveillance video. Unfortunately, because it was so foggy that night, a lot of the video was very poor quality. We did notice several vehicles moving through the area, moving up and down Ennis Jocelyn in the immediate area that evening. But because the video was so poor, we couldn't get license plates off the vehicles. In most cases, it was really hard to determine a make and a model, other than maybe a blue 4-door or white 2-door, or a pickup truck. But that's where all the effort and the time and the investigation went in as far as the digital search warrants. So what we did is our investigators began issuing search warrants for cell tower data, all the cell towers in the area. We did gosh, I can't think of the name of it now. Anyway, we did cell tower dumps. We used that information to identify what we believed were the drivers of these vehicles moving through the area. We did identify them, and we interviewed them, and we were at the point when the remains were found in the lift station. We had pretty much gotten to the end of that investigation, and we had it hadn't bore the fruit that we thought it would. Our initial suspicion was that Caleb got in a vehicle with somebody and left the area, and that was kind of what we were acting on. That was our where we were going with the investigation. But once we got all that information back, we identified these individuals that were in the area. We went out, our investigators interviewed them, and we were, based on the investigation, we were able to determine that they had no connection to Caleb. We went through his digital data, through his laptop, through his social media. We even were able to clone his phone as well. We never did find his cell phone, but what our investigators did, our forensic computer people who did a tremendous job, they basically cloned his phone, which is something that was quite unusual. And still, they were unable to establish any connection between Caleb and any of the people that had gone through that area at that time, at that night.
Of course, we were talking earlier, but the big question is how did Caleb end up at the wastewater lift station? And that's a question that we might not ever know.
That's certainly a possibility. It's we don't know for beyond any doubt of how that happened or what actually happened to him. We haven't been able to find any evidence that clearly suggests that he was met with foul play, that there was a homicide involved. Because of the state of the remains, it was difficult to. We couldn't even make the medical examiner here couldn't make an identification and had to send it off to the University of North Texas for DNA analysis. But what has been learned was there's no obvious signs of trauma to what remains are available. There's no gunshot wounds, there's no obvious knife wounds or hatchet wounds or anything like that that would tell us, yes, he was murdered. At the same time, there's nothing, because there wasn't enough of the remains there, we can't say beyond a doubt that he wasn't murdered.
If this was sorry about that. If this was somehow an accident, is there still an investigation that goes into how it happened, or how it ended, or how he ended up there at the lift station, or if it's determined to be an accident somehow?
Well, and like I said, we're continuing. The investigation's not over, but at this point, we don't have any clear evidence of exactly how he ended up in that lift station. We do, we can say that it is a very secure facility there. There's a chain link fence around the facility. It's locked with a padlock. For you to get into that facility, you have to pass through that gate. Once you get into that, inside the gate, there's another lock on the building, and the actual wet well where the remains were found is covered with a steel grate that also has a padlock on it. So it wouldn't be easy for anybody to intentionally dispose of the remains in that manner.
You were talking about how the investigation is almost complete. What are the next steps?
Right now, the number one step is to wait and see what the medical examiner rules. He hasn't made a final ruling yet. We met with him earlier today and kind of shared everything that we have learned, all our information, and we'll wait to see what he rules on this, the manner of death and the cause of death.
This was one of those investigations, whether you knew Caleb or not, people were invested and people were impacted by what happened, because it's, I think mostly because we don't know what happened to Caleb. And so, what is your message, of course, to the countless number of people who helped with the searches that happened, and people who just prayed for his family? What would your message be to the community tonight?
Our number one, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the family. This is not, a very tragic ending to it. It's not the ending that we had hoped for. Certainly it wasn't the ending the family hoped for. So they're an incredible family. Mr. Harris and his family are incredibly strong, have a very strong faith, and I think that shone through from the very beginning. But as far as the volunteers, I've never seen anything like it. Like I said, it really makes me proud of the community that I serve, that we have that type of community, that people are willing to go out there and walk through the heavy brush and the mud and the drainage ditches and all over, the people that searched, the people that made donations, food and drinks for the searchers, the people that prayed, the people that had prayer vigils. Just, it's an incredible reflection on our community. And then, of course, the college, the volunteers out there, and then, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Harris's community up in New Braunfels. It's just, it's sad to see what happened, but if there's anything positive that comes out of it, is just the fact how many people, like you said, were very invested in it. People that really, I'm sure, are taking it very hard, the outcome, beyond the family. And hopefully they'll be able to support the family and continue that as the days go by.
I believe you answered all of my questions there.
Mm-hmm.
Has the family, I know there's probably been some communication with the family.
Mm-hmm.
Have they asked for the investigation to continue? You know, when it's your loved one, I'm sure they want to see more.
Sure.
You know, results or more. You know, it's hard to accept a conclusion.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it still is an open investigation, so we haven't closed it. We meet with Mr. Harris pretty much on a weekly basis. He comes by and we share with him as much as we can. Now that we're at the point we're able to share more with him. You know, what we have done. Certainly, yeah. They want finality. So.
I believe that's all I have for you. Is there anything else that you feel is important to get out? You know, since we're here, and anything else that the public needs to be aware of?
You know, this came up early on. We talked about it. You know, there's people that say, well, there's a huge number of missing people around here, and that there's a chance. You know, people like to throw the word serial killer around and things like that. We've looked at the other cases early on. We immediately looked at all the other open missing person cases that we had, and pretty quickly we determined there's no connection. There's no real commonality. Each one of them had some very unique circumstances involved, and Caleb's disappearance was totally different than most of the missing person cases that we work. Like I said, generally a lot of times people have a history of disappearing, or they have a history of mental illness or drug abuse or a combination of, and those people, it's not surprising when they turn up missing. With Caleb it was extremely rare. So I guess the message is, we don't have there's nothing that we're connecting this one to. And like I said, at this point, there's nothing that definitively says that it was a foul play.
Just got a couple more questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate this. When police searched, were there any manhole covers or manholes in the nearby fields that did not have their covers on?
So when we initially conducted the initial search, the day within the immediate days following the search, we searched that entire area around the apartment complex, all those open fields, all around in the brush, all the way out to the Oso Preserve, up and down. There was no report of any missing manhole covers or missing manholes in that area. Our investigators, or the search team, actually opened all the drainage manhole covers all the way from SPID on Ennis Jocelyn, all the way from SPID back to Holly. They did not open the sewage manholes. But like I said, in the initial couple of days following, there was no reports. Nobody reported a missing manhole or open manhole cover or anything like that. On April 17th, we got a tip through, and I don't know if it came in through Crime Stoppers or the tip line, we got a tip that a woman had been out there in that field that had been searched very thoroughly, the field right across from the apartment complex, and had found an open manhole. Our investigators went out there the following day on April 18th, and they did find that there was a open manhole cover. It wasn't just the cover, it actually the entire top of the manhole had been knocked off. They looked into the manhole, which is about 18 feet deep. At the time, it was somewhat full of water. So they reached out to the wastewater department, who happened to be in the area, fortunately for us, but they reached out to some wastewater workers, and they had them go over to the lift station at Perry Place, and they actually activated the pump over there, which brought down the level of the water in that manhole. So the investigators searched it the best they could at that time and didn't see anything. They also went to the lift station itself and looked in that wet well to see if they could see anything, and they didn't observe anything at that time. So that was April 18th.
Do y'all think Tropical Storm Alberto had any role in, of force the discovery of the remains?
That is a possibility. And I'm not an expert in wastewater management, but what they told us, though, is even though it's wastewater, this is the sewage system, even though that's what it's designed for, they did say that when we have really, really heavy rains, rainwater will infiltrate into the system. So there is a certain amount of rainwater that will get into the system and increase the flow above and beyond what the normal flow would be. So that is a possibility that because of those rains, and we had some heavy rains, tropical storm Alberto, the weekend before the body was found, there is that possibility. We don't know for a fact, we don't know for certain, but that is something that they said could be a possibility.
Last question for you. When was the last time you were able to speak with the Harris family? You said you've been in contact or in touch, and then do they still believe this was a homicide?
Well, that's a question you'd have to ask them. The last time I spoke to Mr. Harris is we met with him on Friday. We met with him on Friday, and that's the last time I've spoken to him directly. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For answering those questions. It helps, of course, shed some light on a lot of that. So.
Mm-hmm.